What is going on, guys, and welcome to CSS tutorial. In this video we're going to talk about float property. So let's say that right now you can see we have two divs, and one has ID 1 and one has ID 2, and you can see that they both texts are exactly the same, and they're placed, let's say, one on top of each other, right? But let's say that if I'd want to start actually styling this text and start moving it around, right? So the first thing that I could do is actually go to quick edit over here, and I could use the float property, and I could say, let's say we have these options left or right. So I would say I want it floated left. However, I right away need to tell the browser actually the width that I'm going to be using. So I could use the width of 200 pixels, let's say. So you can see what happens. I have floated this element to the left. However, I taken out of the a static element. So right now you can see what's happening, that this element is actually flowing around this element. But let's just keep going with this video and you'll understand everything shortly. So the thing over here is I have width over here 200 pixels, right? Well, most commonly I'm just going to use the percentages because it's going to make a little bit more sense. So you can see right now how I'm using 30% of width, right? And you can see that I actually use 30% of width, and you can see that right away this element is actually sitting right next to the other one, right? This one is 30% and this one is just flowing all the way up. So we have a couple of options what we can do. First one, what we can do is, let's say, go over here and we're going to use the property, and the property is actually use clear. So clear is actually allows us to avoid this problem where actually they're sitting side by side. So what we can do is over here we can just find clear left, and we go over here, and now we can see that we have this floated this element over here like this. However, the next element is actually sitting where right underneath, like we haven't been actually floating this element at all, right? Another option, we can actually float the other element too. And what we can do over here, we can say float, and I could say that I want to float it right like this, and I want to say that width, I would want to say, let's say, another width, and I would want like another 30%, right? Not 3 negative, actually 30. So now you can see that how both of them are sitting actually side by side, and both of them are 30%. So if I'd really want over here, I could go like this, and this one would be 50%, and this one also would be 50. You can see that how exactly they use the whole span of the window, right? So they're sitting side by side, 50%. Now, let's check out some other things. But before that, I actually want to use a border property, and I want to say 2 pixels solid black, right? And you can see right away what's happening. It's changing. It's not using 50% anymore because we're actually adding these 2 pixels. So remember, when you're working with widths and you want 50%, you need to actually account for the border too. So over here, if I'm going to write a border, and I'm going to say the border is also going to be 2 pixels solid, let's say red over here, you can see that I'm just going to save this over here like this, and we'll check it out why it's not showing 2 pixels. Oh, because I didn't have the semicolon over here. So you see what's happening. So we go over here, and you can see that it's obviously more than 50%. They're not sitting side by side because of the border that we added, right? But let's say that we're going to change it around, and we're going to do it like, I don't know, like 30 again, right? Over here 30, and it's going to be over here 30. So now we have 2 of these elements, right? Not 330. Well, let's check it out what happens if we add one more div underneath here. So let's add another div in the bottom over here, and I'm just going to say div, and I'm just going to start typing some gibberish, right? And you can see what's happening, that this gibberish actually is going in between them, right? Because they're both floated left and right. So technically they're out of the usual rendering. So they're pretty much they're on their own. And the way, if we want to avoid this, let's say that if we want these 2 elements left and right, we can obviously make space. So there's no space for this element. So let's say 50% and 50%. But we can also do with this div element over here, we can just go over here and we can add a attribute over here, and I'm going to say attribute ID, and it's going to be 3 over here like this. And then I'm going to say that, listen, quick edit, and what I would do is actually clear, and I would say clear both. And now you can see what's happening is that this element is actually sitting here right underneath because it's actually clearing both of them. So if you want to avoid element floating all the way to the top, you should use clear. And in this case, I'm going to use clear both, or you can use just in general clear if you are floating one of the elements. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in next video.